Our next session is called Coming Together Around SDG6, Water and Sanitation. So we met Snowy Khoza, our moderator, who's the CEO of BigenAfrica yesterday, and I think she was the one who introduced to us this acronym of Sanitation, Health, Innovation, Technology. I think it makes a very interesting acronym that seemed to capture our imagination at the time. This panel is going to revisit the water and sanitation issue and especially look at it from the perspective of SDG6. And one of the key words in the title, two of the key words, are really about coming together, and I think that's kind of where we're going to go with this. So if I can, I'll move on stage. Snowy, over to you. Thank you very much.
A very good afternoon to our President, ministers that are here. Thank you very much for this session. This is a very, very important session. Without water, there is no life. We say water is life, sanitation is dignity. Indeed, yesterday, at our session, water and sanitation session, there was a question that was asked as to, we're talking globally, why not bring this issue of water and sanitation to small islands? And today in this session, we have one of the well-experienced directors that is going to speak about the experiences in Mauritius. And I hope that for most of us who are asking about what are the examples of Mauritius, we're going to hear that in this session. I'm excited. I'm excited because we also will be hearing from the co-chair of the UN Water High Level segment. And I won't mention her name. Her name will come later, you know her already. Yesterday, she reminded us during the opening session that it is important to take issues of biodiversity seriously. And one of the things that she mentioned was that without water, the planet Earth would not exist. And today, we're going to hear about how the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 6, which is to ensure access to clean water and sanitation for all, how that is going to pan out in line with the Budapest summit that is coming end of November in this year. So that roadmap should help us to chart it. Let me firstly introduce the panel. In absentia, we've got Professor Jill Farrant. As you knew, yesterday she was interviewed on Skype. She couldn't be here because she's not feeling well. We have a lady who's going to introduce herself, Ipileng Mokari, to read the script on behalf of Jill. In the panel, 2 participants. So Ipileng is not going to answer questions. So after she finishes reading, she's out of here. She must run for her life. And the 2 panelists, the first one is Lormus Juggoo. Lormus is the Director of Water Resource Unit in the Ministry of Energy and Public Utilities in our host country, Mauritius. Lormus joined this unit as a young engineer in 1996. In 2015, last year, he was promoted to directorship of this unit. So his 20 years, if one has to count, from 1996 to 2016, Lormus has got 20 years of consistent, sustainable, and successful contribution in the ministry. No wonder you were asked to be the director and to also support our Lady President in the high-level panel as one of the advisors. Lormus brings an amazing wealth of experience. He's got experience in sustainable water resource management. Remember, he's a civil engineer. He also has experience in environmental sustainability, contract management, project finance, and project management. A position that Lormus positions you very well in this debate. May I ask you to come to the fore? Can you give him a big hand? Now, the most important guest, our host, Her Excellency, Dr. Ameenah Gurib-Fakim. I believe that she doesn't need to be introduced. We all know her. And the whole 2 days, we've been grabbing her to ask for selfies. I've never seen a humble person like her. She's patient, she's kind, she's wise, she's all in one. As Mr. said, I mean, really. We all know her as the first woman president in Mauritius. I would also have failed if I don't mention that she's one of the most well-renowned biodiversity woman specialists in the world, having authored more than 26 books, and I was privileged to have one of her books from her office signed by her the first time when I visited Mauritius. Thank you, Madam President. She's a proponent of gender equity, a peace negotiator of note, and a passionate development activist. An activist not only for Mauritius, but an activist for the world. No wonder she was recognized in terms of all the many awards that she has received. And I want us to give her a standing ovation for being the co-chair of the United Nations Water High Level. Madam, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You may be seated. Thank you. Before I sit down to ask the two panelists questions, I'm going to ask Ipileng to come first and read the note from Jill.
Good afternoon, everybody. I have a deep sense of gratitude. Thank you, Snowy, for allowing me to stand up here. And good afternoon, and all protocol observed, to Her Excellency, the President. I'm one of the South African delegates, and my name is Ipileng Mkari. I am quite happy to stand here and look like Jill, although I'm not Jill. And as my fellow delegate did say, I won't be answering any questions. However, Jill has prepared something for today, and I think it's very important that we actually do hear it from her, directly from her words. I am a plant specialist whose main research interest lies in the design and ultimate production of crops that will survive extreme drought conditions. My input here will thus naturally be biased towards pointing out the importance of finding agricultural solutions to this problem. Although it's a well-known statement, I reiterate it here. Water is essential for life because all living, actively metabolizing organisms, from viruses and bacteria to you and I, are comprised predominantly of water. We are 65% water, and loss of a small amount, as little as 1% in humans, results in metabolic distress and death. This obviously has implications for our food security. Drought is the largest threat to world agriculture, and climate models predict increased desertification in tropical and mid-latitude regions due to rising temperatures and declining and unpredictable rainfall. I'd like to cast all of your eyes to the slides. This is strikingly demonstrated by the accompanying slide, taken from a study by DIE 2011, in which all areas colored in red, as you can see, illustrate regions where until recently have been successfully used in agriculture. But at this point in time, top left, are no longer viable options due to the lack of sufficient rainfall. The predicted situation in 2050, which is bottom right, I hope it's the correct slide, is dire. Much of Africa, being a South African, and this obviously being of relevance to me, a continent reliant predominantly on rain-fed agriculture, will seemingly have insufficient rainfall to provide food security for its growing populace. As the map from the study does not clearly illustrate the predicted situation for Mauritius, I have taken the liberty of including an enlargement of this area in both maps, which we don't have. Okay. While global warming is predicted to result in increasing periods of severe drought in your country, it is also predicted to bring about periods of intense flooding. This, together with predicted rise in sea levels and associated salinity problems, will impact on agricultural productivity. We thus urgently need to find innovative solutions, ladies and gentlemen, to provide security in the face of the environmental extremes which we will be facing. These should include design and production of fruit crops with improved tolerance to such environmental extremes, but in my somewhat naive opinion, should also take into account societal aspects of the countries involved. This might differ quite considerably amongst first world and developing world countries. It has been estimated that 80% of the world's extreme poor live in rural areas, with 60% finding employment in agriculture. Women comprise 43% of the total agricultural workforce in developing countries. For these folk, agriculture is not just about jobs or profitability. It is a way of life that provides social cohesion and security. The FAO has proposed that boosting agricultural productivity is among the best ways to raise living standards. But according to the World Bank, that is the DFA Forum, May 2016, this sector does not lend itself to easy solutions or the potential for quick win investments that might attract funders. They further propose that large-scale or ill-conceived commercialization of agriculture in fragile situations can damage rather than support livelihoods and might aggravate conflicts and induce urban migration. I am poorly equipped to propose a solution, and I guess I hand over to you to debate this, but leave you with a thought. Government and private sector funding could be sought to assist farmers in fragile societies to become part of sustainable market-based systems that can only produce sufficient yields, be it plants or livestock, for food security, but also allied product-based agriculture, which will furthermore generate employment and income for such farmers. This would allow for small units of land, possibly no more than a few hectares each, to be used to feed and or provide for their societies and communities. Their yields can be significantly improved through ongoing scientific research into select crops best suited to that area, plants obviously being more weather dependent, and streamlining of farming operations for improved crop and animal management, inter alia. Such local systems could eventually create an agricultural infrastructure that makes the sector more attractive for domestic and international finance. And that is on behalf of Jill Farrant. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Ipileng. Indeed, I think Jill has highlighted some of the challenges and solutions that this discussion is going to try and talk to and address and propose going forward. Now, I want to start with you, Lormus, if I may call you that way.
Yeah, it's okay.
That you should give us a recap of what the MDGs move towards the SDGs puts and proposes for way forward.
Thank you, Snowy. The first thing is that before we come to the MDGs, it's important to know how the MDGs, in fact, emanated. It's important to recall that in 1992 you had the Rio Summit, and after that, MDGs emerged in the year 2000. What was the rationale behind the MDGs was to give the impetus and a bit of the momentum to address very urgent issues that the world was facing, such as the eradication of poverty, gender equality, HIV/AIDS, access to sanitation and water, and so on. MDGs, you would recall that there were 8 goals in all, and out of these 8 goals, there were 18 targets. But since then, there has been lots of progress that have been made. But at the same time, there has been lots of challenges also before we come up with sustainable solutions for our different goals and targets to be met over the 15 years period, that is from 2000 and 2015. What has been is that in terms of the access to water and sanitation, if we take, in the years 2000, we had billions of people without access to water. But when we see the UN 2015 report, it is that 2.4 billion people have had access to water over this 15-year period. So this shows a bit of the momentum that this created, the MDGs created at the global level. It acted as if how to call it, as a nucleus whereby states, society, all came up together towards achieving all these goals for the benefit of humanity. In terms of the sanitation, what has happened is that at the threshold of 2015, we have 2.1 billion people have had access to safe sanitation. But this is a bit, I can say, the bright side of the story. But still, we have the other side of the coin. Around 700 million people still lack access to water. and around 2.4 billion people still lack access to sanitation.
What do you think are the challenges? Can you talk to us about the challenges?
In fact, the challenges that has been faced, in fact, if we take how the MDGs emerged and were implemented, the challenges were that there has been some uncertainties at the start of the implementation of the MDGs in terms of the political will, in terms of the disparities of the various states, in terms of the financing aspects related to how we can achieve these goals. So all these challenges, in fact, it should serve as a lesson for us. We are moving now on a different path, the Sustainable Development Goals. These should serve as lessons to our future that we are going to trace, in fact, for the next 15 years. What I mean to say is that if we take the different issues that were raised when we have been implementing the MDGs, there has been one of the most fundamental issues that have been raised is financing, and at the same time the political will also. But these should be lessons learned that for the future of the SDGs, we need to address these issues right now because we have a time frame of 15 years.
Yeah. I would like to come back to you in terms of the issue of financing, but maybe later after we hear from the President in terms of her role as the co-chair of the high-level panel on the SDG6. I want you to think about some of the strategies and the solutions. I want to share also with you some of the examples that we have in South Africa in terms of addressing the issue of financing. So, Madam President, can I request that you take us in a small journey, the preparation towards the Budapest summit, in line with the SDG6. What are the issues that we need to think about, and what is the plan that we need to prepare towards the summit?
Thank you, Snowy. First of all, we must say that the idea of having the SDG co-chaired by Mauritius and Mexico was put forward in Davos in January of this year. And since then, as you know, it's an initiative, it's a joint initiative between the UN and the World Bank to put forward this panel, at least for the SDG6, water and sanitation. And as you have said, and I think other speakers have said, water is life, sanitation is dignity to humanity. But I think I will draw upon what has been said yesterday in looking not just at this particular SDG, but looking at all the SDGs in what Nicolas Hulot said yesterday. It is in line with solidarity. Solidarity among all of us, because this solidarity will be again called upon, especially in the wake of climate change. And as Lormus has said, 700 million people on the African continent don't have access to clean water, and 2.1 billion worldwide. Now, while there has been gains, as has been mentioned again by the MDGs, we have to build on the best practices, and we also have to look at the caveats and the lacunas of the MDGs so as to reinforce them when we are addressing the SDG. Now, what will be the expectations of, we have a 2-year mandate, at least at the level of this panel, to look at several issues. And Jill has rightly pointed out the issue of water in agriculture. Now, why this is becoming such an issue is, again, I bring it to the African continent, which holds 60% of the untilled land of the planet under agriculture. And again, the World Bank figures, which states that by 2030, 40% of this agricultural land will no longer be tillable or sustainably grown for agriculture. Now, what this impacts, what this means, is that we are looking at a scenario where staple crops will no longer be grown in these very lands, which, of course, also, again, as a matter of parenthesis to bring it to this forum here, are managed by women. because they are the breadwinners. So we have a scenario, a crisis scenario in the wake of climate change being one of the key changer. So what will be the objectives of this panel is to look at this scenario, to build in all the scenario across the world as to how we will address access to water, whether we are still in a position to look at water purely as a commodity, or do we address water as a human right? These are fundamentals which will need to be addressed. Now, having said this, water is a right, water is also a commodity. We also need to look at the management of water. In the wake of climate change, how to, we are bringing in another component which has been discussed. Africa is the blue continent, because there's still many areas of pockets or areas, and I'm not going to say about pockets in Africa, but it's so big. There are places where water can be harvested. Now, how can this water be harvested sustainably? These are issues. So we'll need to look at advocacy, we need to look at policy, we need to look at best practices, how best we can also share practices, and we also need to look at the strategy in the medium to long term in the wake of a changing climate. And I think this is, again, very critical to flag in upfront that we have a new dynamic. While before, when the MDG was there, we were discussing in 2000, maybe this component was not flagged in. So we need to also to always bring to the attention that climate change will be influencing greatly on access, on delivery, and management of water. Because you will see, perhaps Mr. Lormus will tell us that Mauritius, we have what, an average 4 meters of rain per year, something like this. But we need to see, for example, we should no longer be talking about non-revenue water anymore. We should have ways and means of preserving and a major distribution of the water that we have. And if we really want to have it as a commodity, how best we can export it? Again, this is my deformation of private sector.
Madam President, you just mentioned the issue of the private sector, that maybe the private sector would have a role. I've seen in most of the countries, especially, for example, in South Africa, the private sector is also participating in terms of bringing water infrastructure into the country. What are the lessons that you would suggest, using Mauritius as an example, in bringing the private sector? Maybe Lormus can answer that.
This is a very key question. In fact, you will see that these days, I jump a few months back, there has been a new act that has been enacted at the Parliament, what we call the BOT Act. This facilitates the involvement of private sector in infrastructure development. This is one of the initiatives. But in fact, the financing of the SDGs and financing of the whole water sector, this is not only a big issue in Mauritius, but it is throughout the whole world. Why is it that sometimes we ask the question, why is it that the water sector is a bit, if I can term it as the poor child, if I can say so? Why? Because the telecom sector is high on demand in terms of private sector participation. Why? Because a World Bank report has indicated that the telecom sector, the rate of return of investment is approximately 20 to 25%. However, for water it ranges around 5%. So the appeal towards the water sector is not there. Why? Because is that the risks involved in the water sector, in infrastructure development, these are quite high. For private sector to invest, they need to have that, someone has to bear that risk. That's what we say, that here government has a very important role to play together with the private sector to bring in investment so that appropriate infrastructure is put in place so that we can address these SDGs.
Yes, while we are talking about infrastructure and funding, but I think there is something as well in terms of changing our habits. That is something that we really have to really look at. And this is where we bring in the education component. And it starts from a very, very early age, that how to educate our young children into the best practices and how, for example, to learn turning the tap off, recycling, water harvesting. And there are projects which are already on the way in Mauritius, for example, with schools that we want to do. And here I make an appeal to the private sector, again, through the corporate social responsibility, for example, to help us provide the necessary infrastructure for schools, for example, so that they can harvest water and use that. So this is something that we can do, but we need a whole strategy. And in fact, when we talk about the SDG6, this is one of the strategies as well of how best to use whatever water we have, the best ability to the best way we can. But the education component, the advocacy, also the communication also have to be put in place so that we have a very highly way of sustaining and, of course, judicious utilization of our water resources.
I agree with you, Madam President. The issue of skills, transfer, education, awareness is very important. The biggest question that comes is that in areas where there's no water completely, where there's water scarcity, what are other strategies that we can do to bring water? Because it's one thing to teach children or communities about water preservation when they don't have water. I just want to get maybe just one line so that we can move to other questions.
In fact, I would say that the basic thing that we need to address is that we have on our left-hand side, supply side, and on the right-hand side, we have the demand side. It's a question of balancing these two. This is the whole strategy of the water sector that need to be there.
Yeah, no, I agree.
It's easily said, but so many things to do. From the supply side, it is infrastructure mobilization, water mobilization, inter-basin transfers, in terms of changing habits that Her Excellency said earlier, water demand management, in terms of changing our aging infrastructures, in terms of reuse, recycling, in terms of change in mindset of the whole population, in terms of communication and awareness. So all these things, all these strategies should be coupled together. It's not only that you mobilize water through big infrastructures such as dams and diversions, and then the problem is solved. No, there are other things that need to be inculcated in the whole population. That yes, water is scarce. It is a rare commodity that we need to take care of. In fact, Snowy, I would like there is a very big paradox. In many countries, we experience that. Yeah. Water, we say it is scarce, yet it is cheap. But still, it is scarce, it is cheap, and at the same time, we have the tendency of wasting it. Yeah. It is a triple paradox. We need to address these things.
Yeah. In South Africa, I think you are aware, Lormus, the National Water Act, the provision of water as a human right, but at the same time, making sure that we penalize those big water users through pricing and high tariffs to ensure that those sectors use water sparingly. We also have a component where we call it a social component. So what the government has done is to establish what we call an SPV, a special purpose vehicle, the Trans-Caledon Tunnel Authority, that has been mandated to go and raise funding using the country's guarantees, implicit guarantee, as security to be able to raise funds and build water infrastructure. However, in addition to that, there are issues of water swapping, where the industry, instead of using clean water, is using gray water to do mining, for example, and clean water goes to the communities. There's also what we call fog harvesting. There's a lot of fog that is sitting on top of Table Mountain in Cape Town, for example. And before, we never knew that you can harvest that fog to provide for water. There was an issue of sea water in terms of desalination. So I just want to add to what you were saying, that there are many strategies and we need to pull these strategies together to be able to provide a comprehensive solution. Now, coming back to Mauritius, because I want to emphasize Mauritius, what are the strategies specifically that we are doing in Mauritius? Because a lot of people don't know, and Mauritius is doing well in terms of water, and I want you to talk about that.
Okay. Thank you. Well, we are doing well. I leave it to you. We have lots to do. It is more of a learning by doing process also. What is our strategy for the water sector? We have been investing massively in our water sector. As I said earlier, in fact, our major strategy is that from a supply side management and a demand side management. Supply side means that we need to mobilize our water resources. Mauritius, if you see from the plane, you will see it is very beautiful. But from a water sector side, from the water sector side, it is very complex in terms of the topography, in terms of the various catchments that we have. What is that is we are trying to mobilize our water resources so that we have a zoning system of the whole island. And from that zoning system, what we have is that we supply water to each of these zones. But this is one of the strategies for supply. But the other thing that we are coming up now is that we are trying to interconnect our different systems. Means that if we have a scarcity in one, then we will be able to complement the other system. So these are the things that we are coming up with new strategies from the supply side. From the demand side management, what we are doing is that the government is massively investing in a pipe replacement program. That is, 50% of our water is lost in our conveyance system. So what's the use of injecting so much money in mobilizing and treating the water where it is lost? So these are the things that major things that we are doing. But this is from the perspective of the quantity. But the quality also is very important. Quality is important in terms of the water security. But the quality, what we are doing is that we have around more than 50% of our domestic water supply comes from groundwater. And what we are doing is that we are having a sewage program in our urban area that will channel all the wastewater to a centralized wastewater treatment plant in the west. West is a dry part. What we do is that we have how do you call that? We treat these wastewater and we reuse these wastewater for the irrigation. So it is more of a multiplier effect. Investment today, yes, but down the line we need to see how we can optimize and make use of each and every drop that we have, depending on the use that it is intended for. So all these things, and at the same time, we have a pilot project that we are implementing now for the northern aquifer, what we say. It is an integrated water resources management project under the aegis of our ministry, and at the same time with the help of UNDP. What we are trying to address here is that the quality aspect, the quality, and the stress that development imposes on our water resources and our lagoon. We should not forget that water cannot be construed as a single commodity. It is affected by land, by activities on land, and it affects our lagoon. Our lagoon is one of our precious things in terms of our tourism industry. So it is a bit, in a nutshell, that we are doing from that perspective. But there are other things also in terms of water governance that we need to address in terms of our legal system, in terms of our institutional arrangements that we have, And in terms of our management mechanism, in fact, our ministry is planning to have a private sector participation for the utilities sector in order to enhance the management and the distribution of domestic water supply.
Wow, there's a lot that we are doing in Mauritius. So for those of you that have still questions on what we're doing, please do grab him around during lunchtime. But I want Her Excellency to make an input, but also talk to the way forward and add to say, what are we doing in terms of bringing women in water? What are we doing to bring women in agriculture? And what is the vision that you have by bringing us together here as women in this forum to address some of the issues, for example, water?
Thank you. But before I continue, I must say that Mr. Lormus is also one of the Sherpas for the SDG6. So he comes in with the technical aspect because we have one more Sherpas who is based in New York at our mission there. So he comes in on the diplomatic side, but Lormus will come in from the technical side. And I think from what we've heard, he has already got quite a lot of experience to share. So because, as you have said, leading up to Budapest in November, what do we bring to the table from Mauritius is precisely all these experiences. So these experiences will be, of course, tried in mainstream into all the areas I've just mentioned in terms of policy, in terms of advocacy, in terms of communication, education, and you have rightly said, in terms of private sector contribution to this. So whatever we have done over the years will be flagged into these various components so that this is what we'll bring to the table in Budapest. And at the same time, we will, between now and November, try to see how we can start a few pilot projects, be it at schools, and as I've just mentioned, for example, the water harvesting will be one example. And we also must not forget Rodrigues, because they're also doing some very interesting work as well on water issues. And but one thing, again, we must stress, and this is why the Women's Forum comes in as a vehicle to address this need, is that whilst Mauritius has got all the good points in terms of water sufficiency, the projections are not looking good in the light of climate change. And in the years to come, it is, again, I'm not being kind of, trying to scare anybody, but these are the projections as per modeling which have been done, that we are going to become water stressed as well because of all that is happening globally. Again, I will bring in this notion of solidarity because we are operating in a global level where the challenges are global, so we need global solutions. And of course, water, we have just seen this year, we've had, for example, flooding. In 2013, we've had flooding with loss of lives. This year, we had flooding with no loss of life, but of course, damage to infrastructure. And there has been years where we had a severe period. I don't call it drought in Mauritius because I don't feel that drought really applies. But we've had long period where there has been no proper rainfall. So water was, of course, became a very big issue. And of course, who talks about insecurity in water access, of course, talks about social crisis. So this, of course, goes from one to... So all these we have to bring to the table. And I think we've had a very nice panel just now on addressing the necessity for having not just quantity, but also quality. We are blessed in Mauritius because we don't have, for example, the same problem that Bangladesh has with arsenic, natural arsenic in water. So these are, but at the same time, we have to make sure that whatever water we have, we should be able to recycle it. At least when it goes into the lagoon, it is not causing damage to the ecosystem. But water of a sufficient quality that can be reused again, if only for human consumption, because in some countries it is the case, but here we use it mostly for irrigation. So this forum, again, to bring to the notion of women, because we are here in the Women's Forum, women have to be sensitized that this is going to become an issue. Not perhaps so much on the short term for Mauritius, but in Africa, this will become an issue. And this is why women have to be empowered with the appropriate technologies, the appropriate information, so as to be able to move the harvesting, move the planting, and eventually the harvesting of crops. And recently we've seen a program in Nepal, for example, talking about climate change, where they are getting this abundance of water for growing, but then the water was too much for harvesting and all the crops were washed away. So these are things that we have to make sure the women get to know so that they are empowered to make a difference further down the line, be it in water capture, be it in agriculture, be it in other areas where, of course, water, which is, of course, life, matters.
Wow, that's a mouthful. Thank you so much, Your Excellency. I'm going to take maybe 2 questions. Time is not on our side. I think the discussion was very important. We needed to clarify and address some of the issues so that we are all ready for the November Budapest summit, and now we understand even the SDG6. Is there a burning question quickly? There's a lady here in front as well, so I'll only take the 2. The lady at the back. And just tell us your name and the question to the person that you want to address.
I'm Mrs. Ameenah from Mauritius. I'm from Ministry of Environment. I'm from part of the administrative cadre. I just want to comment on what the President Excellency has said, whether water has to be considered as commodity or right. But I think the forum, for Women's Forum, it has to be as a right as well. Because most women will feel that water is a basic necessity. If we talk of human rights and all rights, we have to think for water as a basic necessity, as a right. Can I briefly ask for Mr. Lormus regarding, don't you think we have a problem in Mauritius for water retention? We have rainfall, we have rivers and everything. All these are being drained away. Thank you.
Yes. I don't know whether this suffices.
A big yes.
Yes, but we are doing something. We are doing something in terms of having infrastructure mobilized, such as construction of dams. In fact, we have in our strategic planning for the next 15 years, we are going to construct at least 2 more dams. One is under construction and 2 more dams. Of course, this is subject to funding also. You see, small economies, we are vulnerable from that perspective. It's not that easy to mobilize funds for big projects. As a construction of a dam, it requires so much of planning, so much of consultation, so much of mobilization of funds over time, and reviewing all your strategies, and at the same time forecasting what is happening, what will happen in the project area in the region. So all these things we need to take on board before we plan our project and implement it. But rest assured, this is the strategy. Of course, there is conditional, but the thing is that we are here to implement it.
Yeah, I think we also did not mention the issues of the dignity, the sanitation, but it's a long story, so we will cover it during lunchtime, so you're still here. Madame in front.
Yeah, Rama Sofia Raj, the United States Press Agency. Thanks for this amazing session. And thank you for having liaison with solidarity about we were speaking yesterday. My question goes regarding the water scarcity. Your neighbor's continent, that is China, is facing another problem as well of water scarcity. And the Prime Minister said that it's a threat for the survival of the nation, which is, like you said, these are the predictions. So China has launched a project of the largest pipeline that is going to weave, going to strategic and geopolitics, but I mean, that's the topic, by the way. So speaking about solidarity, can we imagine the same in Africa? This large, giant aqueduct? Or can we maybe imagine that, like you said, export resources of your harvest water? Or can we maybe imagine that, you know, this solidarity can maybe link between the 2 continents? And can we imagine something in terms of strategy?
Thank you. There has been bad examples, but there are some good examples as well. Some of the bad examples, I will not cite any country, but there have been examples where, for example, many villages have been wiped out, and of course with associated problems to communities. There are examples which are up and running, and I think right now of Fethien's country, Ethiopia, where there's a big dam being constructed there on the Nile. Blue Nile eventually will join the Nile in Khartoum and will go on. So there is an example there. But there is a good example in West Africa where Senegal, you know, the water issue, which was nicely resolved. And again, we have President Macky Sall on the panel, and he will bring in that very nice component of solidarity in West Africa where things have been done very positively. So I think what we can again bring to the table is all these good examples and how to counteract and counterbalance the negative ones. So again, I think this is part of the strategy when we talk about the SDG6, is to bring to the fore what's the good things which are happening across the world and how best to address, again, the need that one lady has just said in terms of water as being, you know, human right. And again, we'll have time over lunch to discuss the dignity part.
Yeah, it's a pity that we're standing between you and the plate, lunch plate. So I just want to take this opportunity to thank Her Excellency for hosting us and for the time, and for being the first woman president, but also the first president to bring a women's forum for the first time in Africa. So thank you very much. Lormus, thank you very much as well. So we appreciate your time and everything. Colleagues, thank you very much. Thank you.
And thank you, Snowy, too, for your moderation.